Question 1. Assessment of the Security Operations Center's (SOC) effectiveness in a regulated financial institution requires a comprehensive evaluation. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of risk assessment for a CSA audit? Option A. Conducting a detailed risk assessment of the SOC's architecture, SIEM capabilities, monitoring and alerting mechanisms, threat hunting processes, incident response plans, and reporting procedures to identify and prioritize potential threats and vulnerabilities. Option B. Performing a thorough technical audit of the security information and event management, SIEM, systems configuration, log sources, and correlation rules to ensure optimal data ingestion and alert generation. Option C. Evaluating the average time to detect and respond to security incidents, and the number of incidents successfully remediate within defined service level agreements, SLAs. Option D. Reviewing the SOC's daily, weekly, and monthly reports to ensure all required metrics are accurately captured and presented to management. Correct answer is A. Conducting a detailed risk assessment of the SOC's architecture, SIEM capabilities, monitoring and alerting mechanisms, threat hunting processes, incident response plans, and reporting procedures to identify and prioritize potential threats and vulnerabilities. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified security auditor, CSA, to balance the immediate need for operational efficiency within a security operations center, SOC, against the long-term strategic imperative of proactive threat identification and risk mitigation, all within the specific regulatory landscape of the Certified Security Auditor, CSA, exam's jurisdiction. The auditor must not only understand the technical aspects of SOC architecture and operations, but also how these align with compliance requirements and best practices for risk assessment. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes the identification and analysis of potential threats and vulnerabilities across the entire SOC ecosystem, including its architecture, SIEM capabilities, monitoring processes, threat hunting effectiveness, incident response readiness, and reporting mechanisms. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the CSA's mandate to evaluate the effectiveness of security controls and identify areas of risk. Regulatory frameworks for security auditing, such as those implicitly or explicitly referenced by the CSA certification, emphasize a risk-based methodology. This means focusing resources and attention on the areas that pose the greatest potential harm to the organization's information assets and operational continuity. A thorough risk assessment ensures that the SOC's operations are not just functioning, but are functioning in a manner that effectively manages and mitigates identified risks, thereby meeting compliance obligations and demonstrating due diligence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical configuration of the SIEM system, without considering its integration into broader threat hunting or incident response processes, fails to address the holistic nature of SOC effectiveness. This approach is ethically and regulatorily deficient because it overlooks how the SIEM output is consumed and acted upon, potentially leaving critical vulnerabilities unaddressed. It also neglects the risk of alert fatigue or missed threats due to poor correlation rules or inadequate response playbooks, which are key components of operational risk. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes only the speed of incident response, without a preceding robust threat hunting or proactive monitoring strategy, is also professionally unacceptable. This reactive stance, while seemingly efficient in addressing immediate incidents, fails to address the root causes of security breaches or to identify sophisticated low and slow threats. It represents a failure to proactively manage risk, which is a core expectation of a security auditor. Such an approach can lead to repeated incidents and a false sense of security, violating the auditor's duty to provide a comprehensive and forward-looking assessment. Finally, an approach that solely focuses on generating a high volume of security metrics without a clear link to risk reduction or operational improvement is also flawed. While metrics are important for demonstrating performance, their value lies in their ability to inform decision-making and drive improvements. Without a risk-based context, metrics can become vanity statistics, failing to provide actionable insights or to satisfy regulatory requirements for demonstrating effective risk management. This approach risks misallocating resources and failing to identify genuine security gaps. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the scope and objectives of the audit, including any specific regulatory mandates. 2. Adopting a risk-based methodology to identify and prioritize potential security weaknesses. 3. Evaluating the effectiveness of controls and processes in mitigating identified risks. 4. Considering the interconnectedness of different SOC components, architecture, SIEM, monitoring, hunting, response, reporting, and their collective impact on risk posture. 5. Communicating findings and recommendations in a clear, actionable manner that supports continuous improvement and compliance. Question 2. Which approach would be most effective for a certified security auditor, CSA, to recommend when designing network security architecture and implementing controls for a financial services firm operating under U.S. regulations, considering the need to protect sensitive customer data and comply with relevant compliance frameworks? Option A. A compliance-driven approach that solely focuses on meeting the minimum requirements outlined in relevant U.S. regulations, without considering emerging threats or potential business impacts beyond compliance. Option B. A cost minimization approach that selects the least expensive security solution and configurations to reduce operational expenses, prioritizing budget over comprehensive security coverage. Option C. A risk-based approach that prioritizes security investments based on a comprehensive assessment of threats, vulnerabilities, and potential impacts, ensuring alignment with regulatory requirements and business objectives. Option D. A technology-driven approach that focuses on deploying the most advanced and feature-rich security technologies available, regardless of specific organizational risks or budget constraints. The correct answer is C. A risk-based approach that prioritizes security investments based on a comprehensive assessment of threats, vulnerabilities, and potential impacts, ensuring alignment with regulatory requirements and business objectives. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because a certified security auditor, CSA, must balance the need for robust network security with the operational requirements and budget constraints of an organization. The auditor must identify vulnerabilities and recommend solutions that are not only technically sound, but also align with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. Careful judgment is required to prioritize remediation efforts and ensure that the chosen security measures are effective and cost-efficient. The correct approach involves conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies, analyzes, and evaluates potential threats and vulnerabilities to the organization's network infrastructure. This assessment should consider the likelihood of a threat exploiting a vulnerability and the potential impact on business operations, data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The findings from this assessment then inform the design and implementation of network security controls, including segmentation, firewall rules, IPS configurations, VPN policies, and wireless security standards, all while adhering to relevant regulatory frameworks such as those governing data protection and privacy within the specified jurisdiction. This approach ensures that security investments are targeted towards the most critical risks, providing a defensible basis for security decisions and demonstrating due diligence. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on implementing the latest security technologies without a thorough understanding of the specific risks faced by the organization. This could lead to misallocation of resources, deployment of unnecessary or ineffective controls, and potential compliance gaps. For instance, deploying a complex IPS without a clear understanding of the network traffic patterns and potential attack vectors might result in performance degradation or the generation of excessive false positives, hindering effective threat detection. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost savings over security effectiveness by selecting the cheapest available security solutions. This often leads to inadequate protection against sophisticated threats and can result in significant financial and reputational damage if a breach occurs. For example, using outdated encryption protocols for VPNs or weak authentication mechanisms for wireless networks, while cheaper, exposes sensitive data to interception and unauthorized access, violating principles of data security and potentially contravening data protection regulation. A further incorrect approach would be to implement security controls based on industry best practices without tailoring them to the organization's specific environment and risk profile. While industry best practices provide a valuable baseline, they may not adequately address unique vulnerabilities or regulatory requirements. For instance, a generic firewall rule set might not account for specific application dependencies or regulatory mandates for data segregation, leaving critical assets exposed. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a systematic and iterative approach. First, understand the organization's business objectives and the regulatory landscape. Second, conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify and prioritize threats and vulnerabilities. Third, design security controls that are proportionate to the identified risks and compliant with regulations. Fourth, implement and continuously monitor these controls, adapting them as the threat landscape and business needs evolve. Finally, document all decisions and justifications to ensure accountability and facilitate future audits. Question 3. Implementation of a robust endpoint security strategy encompassing endpoint protection platforms endpoint detection and response data loss prevention DLP, mobile device management MDM, endpoint hardening, patch management, and security configuration management is being audited. The Certified Security Auditor, CSA, must determine the most effective approach to verify compliance with the specified regulatory framework. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the CSA's mandate for regulatory compliance? Option A. Focus on hardening traditional workstations and servers, ensuring strong password policies and regular vulnerability scans, while treating mobile device security as a secondary concern unless explicitly mandated by a specific regulation. Option B. Confirm the presence of EPP and EDR software on all endpoints and assess the technical capabilities and features of these solutions against industry best practices for threat detection and prevention. Option C. Prioritize the deployment of the most advanced EDR solution available, ensuring it integrates with the existing SIEM, and then conduct a post-implementation review of its configuration. Option D. Verify that EPP and EDR solutions are deployed across all endpoints, that MDM policies are enforced for mobile devices, and that patch management and security configuration management processes are documented and regularly reviewed against the organization's internal security policies and the requirements of the specified regulatory framework. The correct answer is D. Verify that EPP and EDR solutions are deployed across all endpoints, that MDM policies are enforced for mobile devices, and that patch management and security configuration management processes are documented and regularly reviewed against the organization's internal security policies and the requirements of the specified regulatory framework. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified security auditor, CSA, to balance the technical implementation of endpoint security controls with the stringent regulatory compliance requirements of the specified jurisdiction. The auditor must not only understand the capabilities of EPP, and MDM solutions, but also how their deployment and configuration align with specific legal mandates and industry best practices relevant to the CSA exam's jurisdiction. Failure to do so can result in significant penalties, reputational damage, and a breach of trust. The correct approach involves a comprehensive audit that verifies the organization's adherence to the regulatory framework-specific requirements for endpoint security. This includes confirming that EPP and EDR solutions are deployed, configured, and maintained according to established standards, and that MDM policies are enforced to protect sensitive data on mobile devices. Furthermore, the audit must assess the effectiveness of patch management and security configuration management processes in mitigating known vulnerabilities, as mandated by the regulatory framework. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core responsibility of a CSA to ensure that security controls meet both technical efficacy and legal/regulatory obligations. The regulatory framework likely mandates specific controls, reporting mechanisms, and data protection standards for endpoints, which this approach systematically verifies. An approach that focuses solely on the technical features of EPP and EDR solutions without verifying their alignment with regulatory mandates is incorrect. This fails to meet the CSA's responsibility to ensure compliance. The regulatory framework likely specifies requirements for the *effectiveness* and *coverage* of these tools, not just their presence. An approach that prioritizes the deployment of the latest EDR technology without a thorough assessment of its compatibility with existing infrastructure and the organization's specific regulatory obligations is also incorrect. This could lead to misconfigurations, operational disruptions, and non-compliance if the new technology does not meet the specific requirements of the governing regulations. An approach that overlooks the importance of mobile device management and endpoint hardening, focusing only on traditional workstation security, is incorrect. Modern regulatory frameworks often extend to mobile endpoints due to the increasing prevalence of BYOD, bring your own device, and remote work, and the sensitive data they can access. Neglecting these areas leaves significant compliance gaps. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic, risk-based approach. A CSA should first identify all applicable regulatory requirements related to endpoint security. Then, they should assess the organization's current controls against these requirements, prioritizing areas of highest risk and potential noncompliance. This involves not just reviewing documentation, but also conducting technical verification and interviewing relevant personnel. The auditor must maintain an objective stance, ensuring that their recommendations are practical, actionable, and directly contribute to achieving and maintaining regulatory compliance. Question 4. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly concerned about the efficiency and effectiveness of their security audit processes. As a certified security auditor, CSA, you are tasked with planning an audit for a financial services firm. Given the firm's extensive IT infrastructure and a limited audit budget, which of the following approaches to audit scoping would best align with the principles of effective security auditing and risk management as defined by the CSA's regulatory framework? Option A. Define the audit scope by prioritizing areas with the highest potential impact on business operations and regulatory compliance, informed by a thorough risk assessment using a recognized methodology like NIST SB 800-30, and focusing audit effort on these high-risk areas. Option B. Scope the audit to include a detailed review of every single security control implemented across all IT systems, regardless of its perceived risk level, to ensure complete coverage. Option C. Limit the audit scope strictly to controls explicitly detailed within the organization's internal security policies, without considering external threat intelligence or industry best practices. Option D. Conduct a broad, shallow audit across all systems and processes with uniform intensity, ensuring that every component receives a basic level of scrutiny. The correct answer is A. Define the audit scope by prioritizing areas with the highest potential impact on business operations and regulatory compliance, informed by a thorough risk assessment using a recognized methodology like NIST SB 800-30, and focusing audit effort on these high-risk areas. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Security Auditor, CSA, to balance the need for comprehensive audit evidence with the practical constraints of time and resources, while strictly adhering to the audit principles and risk assessment methodologies mandated by the CSA's regulatory framework. The auditor must demonstrate a deep understanding of how to effectively scope an audit to address the most critical risks, without becoming bogged down in low-impact areas. The correct approach involves a risk-based scoping methodology that prioritizes audit areas based on their potential impact on the organization's security posture, as informed by established risk assessment frameworks like NIST SB 800-30 or ISO 27005. This aligns with the CSA's ethical obligation to conduct audits efficiently and effectively, ensuring that limited resources are directed towards areas posing the greatest threat. Regulatory guidance for CSA examinations emphasizes a pragmatic yet thorough approach, where audit scope is directly linked to identified risks and compliance objectives. This approach ensures that the audit provides meaningful assurance and actionable recommendations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on documenting every single security control, regardless of its risk level, fails to adhere to the principle of audit efficiency and can lead to an unmanageable audit scope. This can result in a superficial review of critical areas due to time constraints, thereby failing to identify significant vulnerabilities. Ethically, this approach is problematic as it wastes organizational resources and does not provide the most valuable insights. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes auditing only those controls explicitly mentioned in the organization's policy, without considering external threat landscapes or industry best practices, is also flawed. While policy compliance is a component of some audits, A comprehensive security audit must also assess the effectiveness of controls against real-world threats and potential impacts, as guided by risk assessment methodologies. This oversight can lead to a false sense of security if the policies themselves are inadequate or outdated. A third incorrect approach that attempts to audit all systems and processes with equal intensity, irrespective of their criticality or risk profile, demonstrates a misunderstanding of risk-based auditing. This kitchen sink approach is inefficient and dilutes the auditor's focus, preventing a deep dive into areas that truly require scrutiny. It fails to leverage risk assessment to optimize audit effort and deliver the most impactful findings, which is a core tenet of professional auditing practice. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves 1. Understanding the audit objectives and regulatory requirements specific to the CSA certification. 2. Conducting a preliminary risk assessment to identify critical assets, threats, and vulnerabilities. 3. Using the risk assessment results to define a pragmatic and focused audit scope that prioritizes high-risk areas. 4. Developing a detailed audit plan that outlines the specific controls and processes to be examined within the defined scope. 5. Continuously evaluating the scope during the audit and making adjustments based on new information or emerging risks, always with an eye towards efficiency and effectiveness. 6. Ensuring all audit activities and findings are well documented and reported in a clear, concise, and actionable manner, directly linking them back to the identified risks and audit objectives. Question 5. During the evaluation of a critical web application developed using a modern framework, a certified security auditor, CSA, discovers a severe SQL injection vulnerability that could allow unauthorized access to sensitive customer data. The development team is under significant pressure to deploy the application within the next 48 hours to meet a market launch deadline. The auditor is aware that the organization has a documented policy requiring all critical vulnerabilities to be remediated before production deployment, as per industry best practices and regulatory compliance expectations for data protection. What is the most appropriate course of action for the CSA? Option A. Document the SQL injection vulnerability with its potential impact and recommend immediate remediation or a documented risk acceptance by senior management, outlining the potential consequences, while advising on interim mitigation strategies if immediate full remediation is not feasible before the deadline. Option B. Omit the SQL injection vulnerability from the final audit report to avoid delaying the application's critical market launch, assuming the development team will address it post-deployment. Option C. Inform a trusted colleague in a different organization about the discovered vulnerability, seeking their advice on how to handle the situation without the client's knowledge. Option D. Immediately halt the application's deployment and demand that the development team fix the vulnerability before any further progress can be made, regardless of business impact. Correct answer is A. Document the SQL injection vulnerability with its potential impact and recommend immediate remediation or a documented risk acceptance by senior management, outlining the potential consequences, while advising on interim mitigation strategies if immediate full remediation is not feasible before the deadline. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Certified Security Auditor, CSA, is tasked with assessing application security within a specific regulatory context, requiring adherence to established frameworks and ethical conduct. The auditor must balance the need for thoroughness with the potential impact of their findings on the organization and its stakeholders. The ethical dilemma arises from the potential conflict between discovering a critical vulnerability and the immediate business pressures to deploy the application. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the audit process is objective, thorough, and leads to actionable recommendations that prioritize security without unduly hindering legitimate business objectives. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting the identified vulnerability, its potential impact, and recommending remediation steps that align with the organization's risk tolerance and the relevant regulatory framework. This approach is ethically sound and professionally responsible because it upholds the auditor's duty to identify and report security weaknesses. Specifically, within the context of a CSA exam, this would involve referencing established application security standards and guidelines, such as those outlined by OWASP for web application security, and ensuring that the recommendations are practical and achievable. The auditor must act with integrity, providing an unbiased assessment that enables informed decision-making by management. This aligns with the core principles of professional auditing, which emphasize objectivity, due diligence, and the reporting of findings in a clear and actionable manner. An incorrect approach of downplaying or omitting the critical vulnerability from the report is ethically and professionally unacceptable. This failure to report a significant security flaw violates the auditor's duty of care and could lead to severe consequences for the organization, including data breaches, financial losses, and reputational damage. Such an omission would also contravene the principles of professional integrity and competence expected of a CSA. Another incorrect approach of immediately recommending a complete halt to the application deployment without providing alternative, risk-mitigated solutions is also problematic. While security is paramount, an auditor's role is to provide informed recommendations, not to dictate business decisions. This approach lacks the necessary nuance and fails to consider the business context, potentially causing unnecessary disruption and demonstrating a lack of understanding of risk management principles. A professional auditor should offer a range of options, including temporary workarounds or phased remediation, alongside the ideal solution. Finally, an incorrect approach of sharing the vulnerability details with external parties without the organization's explicit consent before the audit is complete and findings are formally presented is a breach of confidentiality and professional ethics. This could jeopardize the organization's security posture and damage the auditor-client relationship, violating trust and potentially leading to legal repercussions. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a structured approach. 1. Understand the scope and objectives of the audit, including the relevant regulatory framework. 2. Conduct a thorough assessment of the application's security posture, utilizing appropriate methodologies and tools. 3. Identify and meticulously document all vulnerabilities, assessing their severity and potential impact. 4. Formulate clear, actionable, and risk-informed recommendations for remediation. 5. Communicate findings and recommendations to the appropriate stakeholders in a timely and professional manner. 6. Maintain objectivity, integrity, and confidentiality throughout the audit process. Question 6. System analysis indicates that an organization is experiencing a significant increase in data breaches and has been issued a warning by the Data Protection Authority regarding noncompliance with data handling procedures. As a certified security auditor, CSA, you are tasked with recommending a process optimization strategy to enhance data security and privacy. Which of the following strategies would be the most effective and compliant approach? Option A. Focus solely on deploying advanced encryption technologies for all data stored on company servers and transmitted across the network, assuming this will address all data security and privacy concerns. Option B. Implement a comprehensive data lifecycle management program that includes robust data classification, encryption for all data types, a multi-layered data loss prevention (DLP) solution, regular data backup and recovery testing, strict adherence to data retention and disposal policies aligned with privacy regulations, and continuous data security audits. Option C. Conduct a one-time, in-depth data security audit and implement only the critical recommendations related to network perimeter security, without addressing internal data handling, classification, or privacy regulations. Option D. Prioritize the implementation of a data retention policy that keeps all data indefinitely to ensure maximum availability for business intelligence and forensic analysis, with minimal emphasis on data disposal. The correct answer is B. Implement a comprehensive data lifecycle management program that includes robust data classification, encryption for all data types, a multi-layered data loss prevention (DLP) solution, regular data backup and recovery testing, strict adherence to data retention and disposal policies aligned with privacy regulations, and continuous data security audits. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for certified security auditors, CSA, in ensuring robust data security and privacy practices within an organization. The professional challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with stringent regulatory compliance, particularly when dealing with sensitive data. The auditor must not only identify vulnerabilities, but also recommend and validate remediation strategies that are both effective and compliant with the specified regulatory framework. The need for deep analysis stems from the potential for significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and legal repercussions if data security and privacy are compromised. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the organization's data lifecycle, from creation to disposal, with a specific focus on implementing and verifying controls for data classification, encryption, DLP, backup, retention, and disposal, all within the context of applicable data privacy regulations. This approach ensures that data is protected according to its sensitivity, access is appropriately managed, and the organization adheres to legal mandates regarding data handling and privacy. For example, under GDPR, a robust data classification scheme is foundational to applying appropriate security measures and fulfilling data subject rights. Encryption at rest and in transit is mandated for sensitive data, and DLP mechanisms are crucial for preventing unauthorized disclosure. Proper backup and recovery are essential for business continuity and data integrity, while clear data retention and disposal policies minimize risk and ensure compliance with data minimization principles. Regular data security audits are the mechanism by which these controls are validated. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical encryption without considering data classification would fail to adequately protect less sensitive data that might still be subject to specific handling requirements, or to protect highly sensitive data that requires more than just encryption, e.g., access controls, anonymization. This overlooks the principle of data minimization and proportionality required by many privacy regulations. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes data retention for business intelligence without establishing clear, compliant disposal schedules would violate data retention limitations and increase the risk of holding unnecessary sensitive data, contravening regulations like GDPR storage limitation principle. Furthermore, an approach that neglects regular data security audits, relying only on initial implementation, would miss evolving threats and potential control weaknesses, leaving the organization vulnerable and non-compliant. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic, risk-based methodology. Auditors should first understand the organization's data landscape and the relevant regulatory obligations. They must then assess existing controls against these requirements, identify gaps, and prioritize remediation based on risk. The process involves not just identifying what is wrong, but also recommending practical, compliant solutions and verifying their effective implementation. This requires a deep understanding of both technical security controls and the legal and ethical obligations surrounding data privacy. Question 7. Performance analysis shows a significant increase in ransomware incidents impacting critical business operations. During a recent ransomware attack, the primary focus of the IT team was to restore services as quickly as possible by deploying the latest available security patches and initiating system restores from recent backups. However, there was no formal investigation into the initial entry vector or an assessment for potential data exfiltration prior to or during the restoration process. As a certified security auditor, CSA, what is the most appropriate course of action to recommend to the organization's leadership regarding the handling of this incident and future preparedness? Option A. Advise the organization to immediately implement a new, more aggressive endpoint detection and response solution and conduct a full system rebuild as a precautionary measure. Option B. Suggest that the organization pay the ransom demand to ensure the fastest possible return to normal operations and prevent further data loss. Option C. Recommend a comprehensive post-incident review to identify the attack vector, assess the full scope of the compromise including data exfiltration, validate the integrity of restored systems, and update incident response plans and security controls based on findings. Option D. Recommend that the IT team focus solely on optimizing backup and recovery procedures to prevent future operational disruptions from similar attacks. The correct answer is C. Recommend a comprehensive post-incident review to identify the attack vector, assess the full scope of the compromise including data exfiltration, validate the integrity of restored systems, and update incident response plans and security controls based on findings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the certified security auditor, CSA, to balance immediate operational needs with long-term security posture and regulatory compliance. The pressure to restore services quickly after a ransomware attack can lead to rushed decisions that might overlook critical security gaps or violate established protocols. The auditor must navigate the technical complexities of the attack, the potential for data exfiltration, a common component of modern ransomware, and the legal/regulatory implications of a data breach, all while under time constraints. The dual nature of the threat, both operational disruption and potential data compromise, necessitates a comprehensive response that goes beyond simple remediation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased response that prioritizes containment, eradication, recovery, and post-incident analysis, all while adhering to relevant regulatory frameworks. This begins with isolating affected systems to prevent further spread, followed by a thorough investigation to understand the attack vector and scope. Crucially, this investigation must include assessing for data exfiltration, as mandated by data protection regulations. The recovery process should involve restoring from known good backups, but only after ensuring the integrity of the backup environment. Finally, a comprehensive post-incident review is essential to identify vulnerabilities, update security controls, and ensure compliance with reporting obligations under applicable laws. This methodical approach ensures that the organization not only recovers from the immediate incident, but also strengthens its defenses and meets its legal and ethical responsibilities. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that focuses solely on restoring services without a thorough investigation into the attack vector and scope of compromise, is professionally unacceptable. This failure to identify the root cause leaves the organization vulnerable to repeat attacks and violates the principle of due diligence in security auditing. Furthermore, neglecting to assess for data exfiltration, a critical component of many modern ransomware attacks, constitutes a significant regulatory failure under data protection laws, which require notification of breaches involving personal data. An approach that involves paying the ransom without attempting to recover data or investigate the attack vector is also professionally unsound. While seemingly a quick fix, it encourages further criminal activity, does not guarantee data recovery, and can still leave the organization with compromised systems and unaddressed vulnerabilities. Moreover, the decision to pay a ransom may have legal and ethical implications depending on the ransomware group and applicable sanctions. An approach that involves immediately rebuilding systems without proper forensic analysis or validation of backups is also flawed. This can lead to the reintroduction of malware or the restoration of compromised data, negating the recovery efforts and potentially violating data integrity requirements. It bypasses the essential step of understanding how the breach occurred, thus failing to implement effective preventative measures. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based incident response framework that aligns with established security best practices and regulatory requirements. This involves 1. Preparation, having a well-defined incident response plan in place. 2. Identification, quickly detecting and confirming an incident. 3. Containment, limiting the scope and impact of the incident. 4. Eradication, removing the threat from the environment. 5. Recovery, restoring systems and data to normal operations. 6. Lessons learned, analyzing the incident to improve future defenses and response. Throughout this process, auditors must remain cognizant of their ethical obligations to protect organizational assets and data, and their professional responsibility to ensure compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Question 8. The monitoring system demonstrates a 99.9% uptime according to the vendor's specifications, and the facility has recently upgraded its CCTV cameras to a higher resolution. As a certified security auditor, CSA, preparing to conduct a comprehensive physical security audit of a critical infrastructure facility, what is the most appropriate initial step regarding the physical security assessment, considering the need for an objective evaluation of existing controls? Option A. Accept the vendor's uptime statistics for the monitoring system and proceed with the audit, assuming the technical infrastructure is secure. Option B. Conduct a full physical walkthrough of the facility, focusing on the new CCTV system's coverage and performance, and then address other security aspects as time permits. Option C. Immediately implement enhanced perimeter lighting and deploy additional security guards to ensure maximum security coverage during the audit period. Option D. Request and review all existing documentation related to physical security policies, procedures, access control logs, and surveillance system configurations before conducting any physical site inspections. The correct answer is C. Immediately implement enhanced perimeter lighting and deploy additional security guards to ensure maximum security coverage during the audit period. Explanation: this scenario presents a professionally challenging situation because it requires a certified security auditor, CSA, to balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the imperative to conduct a thorough and compliant physical security audit. The challenge lies in identifying potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited during the audit itself, or that might be masked by temporary measures. The auditor must exercise careful judgment to ensure the integrity of the audit process and the security of the assessed facility. The correct approach involves a phased assessment that prioritizes the identification and documentation of existing security controls before any temporary adjustments are made. This allows for an objective evaluation of the baseline security posture. Specifically, the auditor should first conduct a comprehensive review of all documented physical security policies, procedures, and system configurations. Following this, a physical walkthrough should be performed to verify the implementation and effectiveness of these documented controls, paying close attention to perimeter security, access control, surveillance, and intrusion detection systems. Any temporary measures implemented for the audit should be clearly identified, documented, and assessed for their impact on the overall security posture. This approach aligns with the principles of a robust physical security audit, which aims to identify weaknesses and recommend improvements based on the actual state of security, not a temporarily altered one. Regulatory frameworks for security auditing, such as those that might be referenced in a CSA exam, assuming a U.S. context for this example, e.g., NIST SB 800-53, which includes physical security controls, emphasize a systematic and objective evaluation of security controls against established baselines and requirements. Ethical considerations also demand that the auditor act with integrity and avoid compromising the security of the audited entity. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement enhanced security measures solely for the duration of the audit, without first documenting the existing state. This would lead to an audit that does not reflect the true operational security posture of the facility, potentially masking existing vulnerabilities or creating a false sense of security. This failure to assess the baseline security is a direct contravention of audit best practices and regulatory expectations for objective evidence gathering. Another incorrect approach is to solely rely on the vendor's claims about the monitoring system's capabilities without independent verification. While vendor documentation is a starting point, a CSA's role is to independently validate these claims through testing and observation. Failure to do so would be a dereliction of professional duty and could lead to an incomplete or inaccurate audit report. A third incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on the technical aspects of the surveillance system and neglect other critical physical security elements like perimeter defenses, access control, or emergency procedures. Comprehensive physical security audit requires a holistic view, assessing all layers of security. Overlooking these other areas would result in a superficial audit that fails to identify significant risks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the audit objectives, the scope of the assessment, and the relevant regulatory and ethical requirements. Auditors should always prioritize objectivity and thoroughness. This involves a structured approach, planning the audit, gathering evidence, analyzing findings, and reporting recommendations. In situations where temporary changes are considered, the auditor must ensure these changes are documented, their impact assessed, and that the audit ultimately reflects the facility's true security posture. Question 9. Quality control measures reveal that a federal agency's network infrastructure utilizes a mix of cryptographic protocols, including some older versions of TLS and SSH, alongside modern encryption algorithms. The agency's public key infrastructure, PKI, is operational, but the auditor notes a lack of formal, documented procedures for key rotation and revocation, relying instead on ad hoc manual processes. The agency's internal policy references outdated NIST guidelines for cryptographic transitions. Which of the following auditor actions best addresses the identified issues in alignment with current U.S. federal regulatory frameworks and NIST guidance? Option A. Recommend immediate decommissioning of all older TLS and SSH versions and mandate the implementation of a formal, documented key management lifecycle process aligned with current NIST SB 800-57 and SB 800-131A guidelines, including a risk assessment for any necessary transitional periods. Option B. Accept the use of older TLS and SSH versions, as long as they are not actively exploited, and advise the agency to update their internal policy to reflect the current NIST guidelines without mandating immediate changes to the PKI key management processes. Option C. Focus solely on the strength of the currently used encryption algorithms, assuming that the operational PKI and ad hoc key management are sufficient as long as no immediate security breaches are detected. Option D. Recommend the agency upgrade to the latest versions of TLS and SSH, and suggest that the ad hoc key management processes be reviewed periodically by senior IT staff, without requiring formal documentation or adherence to specific NIST key management standards. Correct answer is A. Recommend immediate decommissioning of all older TLS and SSH versions, and mandate the implementation of a formal, documented key management lifecycle process aligned with current NIST SB 800-57 and SB 800-131A guidelines, including a risk assessment for any necessary transitional periods. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in cryptography audits, balancing the need for robust security with operational efficiency and compliance. The auditor must not only identify technical vulnerabilities, but also assess the adherence to established cryptographic standards and regulatory requirements. The professional challenge lies in interpreting the implications of deviations from best practices within the context of the specific regulatory framework governing the organization, which for this Certified Security Auditor (CSA) exam is assumed to be U.S. federal regulations and NIST guidelines. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the implemented cryptographic protocols against the latest NIST special publications, SB, and relevant federal mandates. This includes verifying that the chosen algorithms, key lengths, and cipher modes meet current security recommendations and are not deprecated. Furthermore, it requires assessing the public key infrastructure, PKI implementation for proper certificate lifecycle management, revocation mechanisms and adherence to certificate policy (CP) and certification practice statement (CPS) requirements. The auditor must also confirm that cryptographic key management practices align with NIST guidelines, ensuring secure generation, storage, distribution, and destruction of keys. This comprehensive validation ensures the organization's cryptographic posture is both technically sound and compliant with U.S. federal cybersecurity mandates, such as those outlined in NIST SB 800-57, Recommendation for Key Management, and NIST SB 800-131A, Transitions, Recommendation for Transitioning General-Purpose Cryptographic Modules to use stronger cryptographic algorithms and key lengths. An incorrect approach would be to simply accept the use of older, but still functional, cryptographic protocols like SSLv3 or early TLS versions, without a risk assessment and documented justification. This fails to meet the absolute priority of adhering to current regulatory frameworks, which often mandate the deprecation of known vulnerable protocols. Such an approach would violate NIST guidelines that explicitly advise against the use of these outdated protocols due to known vulnerabilities, potentially exposing the organization to significant security risks and noncompliance penalties. Another incorrect approach is to overlook the importance of a robust PKI and focus solely on the encryption algorithms themselves. A compromised PKI can undermine the entire security of asymmetric encryption and digital signatures, regardless of the strength of the underlying algorithms. Failing to audit certificate issuance, revocation, and trust chain validation would be a significant oversight, as it directly impacts the integrity and authenticity of digital communications and transactions, a critical aspect of federal information security. A third incorrect approach is to disregard the need for documented cryptographic key management policies and procedures. Even if keys are technically secure, a lack of documented processes for their lifecycle management creates operational risks and makes auditing difficult. This can lead to insecure practices, accidental key exposure, or an inability to demonstrate compliance during an audit, violating the principles of accountability and due diligence required by federal regulations. The professional decision-making process should involve a risk-based approach, prioritizing the identification and remediation of deviations from current NIST guidelines and federal mandates. Auditors must understand the why, behind cryptographic recommendations, not just the what. This involves staying abreast of evolving threats and vulnerabilities, understanding the implications of using deprecated algorithms or protocols, and ensuring that all cryptographic implementations are supported by sound management practices and comprehensive documentation. Question 10. Risk assessment procedures indicate a heightened threat of public disorder and potential for unauthorized access to critical infrastructure within a designated urban zone. As a certified security auditor, CSA, operating under the regulatory framework of the United States, which of the following approaches best aligns with professional responsibilities and legal obligations for addressing these identified risks? Option A. Advocate for a significant increase in uniformed security personnel presence throughout the urban zone and around critical infrastructure, focusing on visible deterrence, without a detailed analysis of specific threat patterns or consideration of alternative security measures. Option B. Propose the installation of advanced biometric scanners at all entry points to public spaces and critical infrastructure, prioritizing speed of access over a thorough assessment of privacy implications and potential for false positives. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of existing security protocols, identify specific vulnerabilities and threat vectors, and develop a multi-layered security strategy that includes recommendations for targeted technological enhancements, procedural improvements, and personnel deployment, ensuring all proposed measures are compliant with relevant U.S. federal and state privacy laws, such as the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, ECPA, and state-specific data protection statutes, and are subject to appropriate legal and ethical review before implementation. Option D. Immediately recommend and oversee the deployment of widespread, high-resolution surveillance cameras with facial recognition capabilities across all public areas and access points to critical infrastructure, without prior consultation with legal counsel or privacy advocacy groups. The correct answer is D. Immediately recommend and oversee the deployment of widespread, high-resolution surveillance cameras with facial recognition capabilities across all public areas and access points to critical infrastructure, without prior consultation with legal counsel or privacy advocacy groups. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Certified Security Auditor, CSA, must balance the immediate need for enhanced public safety with the legal and ethical obligations to respect individual privacy and due process. The auditor's role is to ensure that security measures are effective, compliant, and proportionate, not to unilaterally implement broad surveillance without proper authorization or consideration of legal frameworks. Careful judgment is required to identify solutions that meet security objectives without infringing upon fundamental rights or exceeding the auditor's mandate. The correct approach involves a systematic, compliant, and collaborative process. It begins with a thorough review of existing security protocols and a detailed assessment of the identified risks. This assessment must then inform recommendations for specific, targeted security enhancements that are proportionate to the identified threats. Crucially, any proposed implementation of new technologies or procedures, especially those impacting public spaces or potentially infringing on privacy, must be vetted against relevant national and local regulations governing surveillance, data protection, and public safety. This includes consulting with legal counsel and relevant authorities to ensure full compliance and obtain necessary approvals. The auditor's responsibility is to advise and recommend, ensuring that any implemented solutions are legally sound and ethically justifiable, thereby upholding public trust and the integrity of the security framework. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the immediate deployment of advanced surveillance technology without a proper risk assessment or legal review. This bypasses critical due diligence steps, potentially leading to the implementation of measures that are ineffective, overly intrusive, or in violation of privacy laws. Such an action would represent a failure to adhere to professional standards of conduct and could expose the organization to legal penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to recommend a broad, untargeted increase in security personnel without a clear justification tied to specific risks. While personnel can enhance security, an indiscriminate increase can be inefficient, costly, and may not address the root causes of the identified risks. It also fails to consider the potential for over-policing or creating an environment of undue scrutiny, which can negatively impact public perception and community relations. A further incorrect approach would be to focus solely on technological solutions without considering the human element and procedural controls. Security is a layered approach, and relying exclusively on technology can create vulnerabilities if not integrated with robust policies, training, and oversight. This narrow focus neglects the comprehensive nature of effective security management and the importance of human judgment and ethical considerations in its application. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes risk-based analysis, legal and regulatory compliance, ethical considerations, and stakeholder consultation. This involves understanding the specific legal and regulatory landscape of the jurisdiction, conducting thorough and documented risk assessments, evaluating a range of potential solutions based on their effectiveness and proportionality, and engaging with relevant parties to ensure buy-in and compliance before any implementation. The auditor's role is to provide expert guidance within these boundaries, ensuring that security measures are both effective and responsible. Question 11. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of mobile device compromise due to unpatched operating systems and the use of unapproved applications, posing a significant threat to sensitive client data. Which of the following remediation strategies best aligns with regulatory requirements for data protection and demonstrates a proactive security posture for mobile device usage? Option A. Conduct mandatory annual security awareness training for all employees on the risks of using unapproved applications and the importance of reporting suspicious activity. Option B. Establish a Security Operations Center, SOC, to monitor mobile device activity and investigate security incidents as they arise. Option C. Implement a comprehensive mobile device management (MDM) solution that enforces security policies, including mandatory patching and application vetting. Option D. Prohibit all mobile device access to sensitive client data and require employees to use only company-issued desktop computers. The correct answer is C. Implement a comprehensive mobile device management (MDM) solution that enforces security policies, including mandatory patching and application vetting. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of mobile device compromise due to unpatched operating systems and the use of unapproved applications, posing a significant threat to sensitive client data. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the Certified Security Auditor, CSA, to balance the organization's need for mobile productivity with robust security controls, all while adhering to specific regulatory frameworks. The auditor must make a judgment call on the most effective and compliant remediation strategy, considering the potential impact on business operations and the severity of the identified risks. The correct approach involves implementing a comprehensive mobile device management (MDM) solution that enforces security policies, including mandatory patching and application vetting. This approach is right because it directly addresses the root causes of the identified risks by providing centralized control and visibility over mobile devices. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data privacy and financial services, depending on the specific jurisdiction implied by the CSA exam, which is assumed to be U.S.-centric for this example, referencing NIST guidelines and relevant state data breach notification laws, mandate that organizations take reasonable steps to protect sensitive information. An MDM solution, when properly configured and audited, demonstrates due diligence in meeting these requirements by ensuring devices are secure, data is encrypted, and only approved applications are used, thereby minimizing the attack surface. An approach that focuses solely on user training without technical controls is incorrect because, while user awareness is important, it is insufficient to mitigate the technical vulnerabilities identified. Relying solely on training ignores the inherent risks of unpatched systems and the potential for sophisticated social engineering attacks that can bypass user awareness. This failure to implement technical safeguards would likely violate regulatory requirements for data protection, as it does not provide a robust defense against known threats. An approach that suggests a complete ban on mobile devices for accessing sensitive data is incorrect because it is often an impractical and overly restrictive solution that can significantly hinder business operations and employee productivity. While it eliminates the risk associated with mobile devices, it may not be a proportionate response to the identified risks and could be seen as an overreach, potentially leading to resistance from users and management. Furthermore, It fails to leverage modern security solutions that allow for secure mobile access. An approach that proposes a reactive monitoring strategy, only investigating incidents after they occur, is incorrect because it is a fundamentally flawed security posture. Regulations and best practices emphasize a proactive approach to security. Reactive monitoring fails to prevent breaches and significantly increases the likelihood of data loss and regulatory penalties associated with a breach. It does not demonstrate the necessary commitment to safeguarding sensitive information. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, followed by the identification of controls that are both effective and proportionate to the identified risks. This includes evaluating technical controls, administrative policies, and user training. The chosen solution must align with applicable regulatory requirements and industry best practices, ensuring that the organization can demonstrate due diligence in protecting sensitive data. The auditor should consider the feasibility of implementation, the cost-benefit analysis, and the potential impact on business operations when recommending or implementing security measures. Question 12. The efficiency study reveals that the current incident response and disaster recovery processes are not adequately integrated, leading to delays in full business resumption following a simulated cyber attack. As a certified security auditor, CSA, which of the following actions would best address this finding while adhering to the CSA's regulatory framework? Option A. Suggest a focus on enhancing the technical capabilities of the Security Operations Center to improve incident detection speed, assuming that faster detection will inherently lead to more efficient recovery. Option B. Propose a reduction in the frequency of disaster recovery testing to reallocate resources towards proactive threat hunting, arguing that prevention is more cost-effective than recovery. Option C. Recommend a comprehensive review and update of the incident response plan to explicitly incorporate business continuity and disaster recovery procedures, ensuring clear roles, responsibilities, and communication protocols for all phases of an incident, from detection to full recovery and post-incident analysis. Option D. Advise the immediate implementation of automated recovery tools to expedite system restoration, deferring the review of existing plans until after the next scheduled operational review. The correct answer is C. Recommend a comprehensive review and update of the incident response plan to explicitly incorporate business continuity and disaster recovery procedures, ensuring clear roles, responsibilities, and communication protocols for all phases of an incident, from detection to full recovery and post-incident analysis. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term regulatory compliance and stakeholder trust during a critical incident. The auditor must navigate the complexities of incident response, business continuity, and disaster recovery, all while adhering to the specific regulatory framework of the Certified Security Auditor (CSA) exam. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise thoroughness and compliance. The correct approach involves a systematic, documented process that prioritizes containment, eradication, and recovery in a manner that aligns with established incident response plans and regulatory requirements. This includes thorough analysis to understand the root cause, effective communication with relevant stakeholders, and meticulous documentation for audit purposes. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the core principles of incident response and disaster recovery, mandated by the CSA's presumed regulatory environment, which emphasizes due diligence, risk mitigation, and accountability. It ensures that the organization not only recovers from the incident, but also learns from it to improve future resilience, thereby meeting audit expectations for robust security practices. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on rapid restoration without proper analysis or documentation fails to meet regulatory expectations for incident investigation and reporting. This can lead to recurring incidents, inadequate remediation, and potential penalties for non-compliance. Another incorrect approach that neglects business continuity and disaster recovery planning in favor of immediate incident resolution leaves the organization vulnerable to future disruptions, violating the spirit of comprehensive security auditing. Finally, an approach that prioritizes cost saving over thoroughness in recovery and testing risks incomplete restoration and a false sense of security, which would be flagged during a CSA audit as a significant control weakness. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the incident response and business continuity plans. They must then assess the incident's impact against these plans, prioritizing actions that ensure containment and minimize damage while adhering to documented procedures. Communication with stakeholders should be transparent and timely, and all actions must be meticulously logged for audit and post-incident review. The ultimate goal is to achieve a secure and resilient state that meets both business objectives and regulatory mandates. Question 13. Investigation of a water treatment plant SCADA system reveals a complex network architecture with both modern and legacy components. The Certified Security Auditor, CSA, is tasked with assessing the security posture. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for a comprehensive audit with the imperative to maintain operational stability and safety? Option A. Conduct extensive penetration testing targeting the IT network segments that interface with the SCADA system, assuming that securing the IT perimeter will inherently protect the ICS. Option B. Begin with passive network traffic analysis and asset inventory to map the architecture and identify communication patterns before considering any active testing. Option C. Immediately deploy automated vulnerability scanners across all network segments to identify known exploits and misconfigurations. Option D. Focus solely on reviewing vendor-provided documentation and theoretical vulnerability databases relevant to the identified SCADA components. The correct answer is C. Immediately deploy automated vulnerability scanners across all network segments to identify known exploits and misconfigurations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in SCADA/ICS security audits, balancing the need for comprehensive vulnerability assessment with the operational constraints and potential risks to critical infrastructure. The auditor must navigate the complexities of legacy systems, proprietary protocols, and the potential for disruption, all while adhering to the specific regulatory framework governing the Certified Security Auditor (CSA) exam. The professional challenge lies in selecting an auditing methodology that is both effective in identifying security weaknesses and responsible in its execution, minimizing the risk of unintended consequences. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased methodology that prioritizes non-intrusive reconnaissance and analysis before any active testing. This aligns with best practices in ICS security auditing, emphasizing a deep understanding of the target environment's architecture and communication patterns. By first mapping the network, identifying assets, and analyzing traffic using passive techniques, the auditor can gain crucial insights without directly impacting system availability. This approach is ethically sound as it minimizes risk to operations and aligns with the principle of do no harm. From a regulatory perspective, it allows for a thorough assessment that can later inform the implementation of targeted, controlled active testing, if deemed necessary and approved, ensuring compliance with guidelines that mandate risk-based security assessments. This methodical, low-impact initial phase is crucial for building a foundation for subsequent, more intrusive testing, ensuring that any active measures are well-informed and justified. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that immediately begins active vulnerability scanning without prior reconnaissance or understanding of the ICS environment is professionally unacceptable. This is because it disregards the inherent fragility of many SCADA/ICS systems and the potential for active scanning to trigger unintended system responses, leading to operational disruptions or even safety incidents. Such an approach violates the ethical obligation to protect critical infrastructure and could lead to regulatory noncompliance if the auditing framework mandates risk mitigation and a phased testing strategy. Another incorrect approach would be to solely rely on vendor documentation and theoretical vulnerability assessments without any form of on-site or network-level validation. While documentation is important, it often does not reflect the actual deployed configuration or the specific vulnerabilities introduced by operational changes or misconfigurations. This approach fails to provide a realistic assessment of the current security posture and could lead to a false sense of security, leaving critical systems exposed. Ethically, it represents a failure to perform due diligence, and from a regulatory standpoint, would likely not meet the requirements for a comprehensive security audit that necessitates verification of implemented controls and actual system vulnerabilities. Finally, an approach that focuses exclusively on IT security vulnerabilities without considering the unique characteristics of ICS protocols and their inherent security limitations is also flawed. ICS protocols were often designed for reliability and speed, not security, and have different attack vectors than traditional IT systems. Ignoring these specific protocol vulnerabilities means the audit would be incomplete and fail to identify critical risks unique to the SCADA/ICS environment. This oversight would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as a specialized audit of SCADA/ICS security must address the specific threats and vulnerabilities of these systems. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, phased approach to SCADA/ICS security audits. This begins with thorough information gathering and passive analysis to understand the system architecture, communication flows, and potential attack surfaces. Only after this foundational understanding is established, and with explicit authorization, should controlled and targeted active testing be considered. This process requires constant communication with system operators and stakeholders to ensure that any testing activities are coordinated and do not jeopardize operational integrity. The decision-making process should always prioritize the safety and availability of the critical infrastructure, guided by the specific regulatory framework and ethical obligations of the profession. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that a client is rapidly migrating critical business functions to a SaaS platform with a tight deadline for full operational deployment. The client's IT team has provided documentation indicating the SaaS provider holds standard industry security certifications. As a certified security auditor, CSA, you are tasked with assessing the security posture of this migration. Which of the following approaches best upholds your professional responsibilities and ensures a secure cloud environment? Option A. Conduct a high-level review of the SaaS provider's security documentation and the client's basic user provisioning process, deeming the migration secure given the provider's certifications and the client's desire for speed. Option B. Recommend immediate full deployment of the SaaS application, relying on the provider's certifications and focusing subsequent audits on user access logs after the system is live. Option C. Focus exclusively on the functional capabilities of the SaaS application to ensure it meets business requirements, deferring detailed security control assessments to a later, less time-sensitive audit. Option D. Advocate for a phased deployment, prioritizing the verification of essential cloud security architecture components, including identity and access management configurations and network controls, and ensuring the presence of a CASP solution and a defined incident response plan before full operationalization. Correct answer is B. Recommend immediate full deployment of the SaaS application, relying on the provider's certifications and focusing subsequent audits on user access logs after the system is live. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a certified security auditor, CSA, due to the inherent tension between a client's desire for rapid cloud adoption and the auditor's responsibility to ensure robust security and compliance. The auditor must balance facilitating business objectives with upholding professional standards and regulatory requirements. The ethical dilemma arises from the potential for pressure to overlook critical security gaps to meet project timelines, which could lead to significant risks for the client and reputational damage for the auditor. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased, risk-based assessment that prioritizes the identification and remediation of critical security controls before full deployment. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and professional skepticism expected of a CSA. Specifically, it requires the auditor to advocate for the implementation of essential security architecture components, such as identity and access management (IAM) and network segmentation, and to verify the configuration of these controls within the chosen cloud computing model e.g., IaaS, PaaS, SaaS. This proactive stance ensures that security is integrated into the cloud environment from the outset, rather than being an afterthought, thereby minimizing the attack surface and potential for breaches. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes the client's long-term security and compliance posture, and it is regulatorily compliant by adhering to best practices in cloud security auditing, which often mandate a thorough review of foundational security elements. Correct approach is analysis, an approach that focuses solely on the functional aspects of the SaaS application without assessing the underlying cloud infrastructure or the client's access controls would be professionally unacceptable. This oversight fails to address the shared responsibility model in cloud security and ignores potential vulnerabilities in how the CSA is integrated into the client's environment. It represents a failure to conduct a comprehensive audit, potentially violating professional standards that require a holistic view of security. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the cloud provider's standard security certifications as sufficient without performing an independent assessment of the client's specific configuration and usage. While certifications indicate a baseline level of security, they do not guarantee that the client's implementation is secure or compliant with their specific regulatory obligations. This approach demonstrates a lack of professional skepticism and an abdication of the auditor's responsibility to provide tailored assurance. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over the implementation of a cloud access security broker, CASP, or robust incident response capabilities would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. CASP are crucial for visibility and control over CSA usage, and a well-defined incident response plan is vital for mitigating the impact of security events. Deferring these critical components introduces unacceptable risk and demonstrates a disregard for established cloud security best practices and compliance requirements. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, phased approach to cloud security auditing. This involves 1. Understanding the client's business objectives and cloud adoption strategy. 2. Identifying applicable regulatory frameworks and compliance requirements. 3. Assessing the chosen cloud computing model, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, and the associated shared responsibility model. 4. Prioritizing the audit of foundational security architecture elements, including IAM, network security, and data protection. 5. Evaluating the implementation and effectiveness of security controls, such as CASP solutions. 6. Verifying the existence and readiness of cloud incident response plans. 7. Communicating findings and recommendations clearly, emphasizing the risks associated with security gaps and advocating for remediation before full deployment. This systematic process ensures that security and compliance are integral to the cloud adoption journey, safeguarding the client's assets and reputation. Question 15. The evaluation methodology shows that a significant data breach has occurred within a U.S.-based financial services organization. The incident involves the unauthorized access and exfiltration of sensitive customer financial information. The incident response team has successfully contained the breach and is now assessing the full scope of compromised data. The auditor needs to advise on the immediate next steps regarding legal and regulatory compliance, considering the organization's obligations under both federal and state data privacy laws, as well as industry-specific regulations. Option A. Focus solely on technical remediation and system hardening to prevent further breaches, deferring all legal and regulatory notification activities until the incident is fully resolved and documented internally. Option B. Prioritize completing a comprehensive forensic investigation to definitively determine the exact number of individuals affected and the precise nature of all compromised data before commencing any notification process. Option C. Immediately initiate the data breach notification process to all potentially affected customers and relevant regulatory bodies, providing all details of the breach as currently understood, while simultaneously continuing the technical investigation to confirm the full scope. Option D. Issue a general public statement acknowledging a security incident without specific details about data compromise or affected individuals, and await further guidance from legal counsel before proceeding with individual notifications. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate the data breach notification process to all potentially affected customers and relevant regulatory bodies, providing all details of the breach as currently understood, while simultaneously continuing the technical investigation to confirm the full scope. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between rapid incident response and the meticulous legal requirements of data breach notification under specific regulations. The auditor must balance the immediate need to contain a security incident with the strict timelines and content mandates for notifying affected individuals and regulatory bodies. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the response is both effective in mitigating further damage and compliant with legal obligations, avoiding potential fines and reputational damage. The correct approach involves a phased response that prioritizes immediate containment and assessment, followed by a swift and accurate notification process that adheres to the specific requirements of applicable data privacy regulations. This includes identifying the scope of the breach, the types of data compromised, and the individuals affected, then crafting notifications that are clear, concise, and contain all legally mandated information within the stipulated timeframes. This approach is justified by the legal and ethical imperative to protect individuals' data and to comply with regulatory frameworks such as GDPR or CCPA, which emphasize transparency and timely communication. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate technical containment without concurrently initiating the legal notification process fails to meet regulatory timelines. This can lead to significant penalties for delayed notification, as stipulated by regulations like GDPR Article 33 and CCPA Section 1798. 150. Another incorrect approach that involves premature or incomplete notification, perhaps due to an incomplete understanding of the breach's scope or the specific content requirements of the regulations, can also result in non-compliance and further legal complications. This demonstrates a failure to understand the nuances of legal and regulatory requirements beyond the technical aspects of cybersecurity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that integrates technical incident response with legal and compliance considerations from the outset. This involves establishing clear protocols for data breach incidents that outline roles, responsibilities, and communication channels between technical teams, legal counsel, and compliance officers. The process should include a risk assessment to determine the severity of the breach and the specific regulatory obligations triggered, followed by a structured approach to containment, investigation, and notification that is documented thoroughly. Question 16. When evaluating an organization's risk management program, which approach best demonstrates a comprehensive understanding of regulatory requirements and business resilience by ensuring that risk identification and response strategies are directly informed by the potential impact on critical business functions? Option A. Conducting a thorough business impact analysis, BIA, to understand critical functions and their dependencies, then using this information to prioritize risk identification, analysis, and the selection of appropriate risk responses, followed by continuous monitoring. Option B. Focusing on identifying and mitigating all perceived high-priority threats immediately, regardless of their specific impact on critical business functions, to demonstrate proactive security measures. Option C. Implementing risk mitigation strategies based on industry best practices, without a specific analysis of how these strategies directly address the organization's unique critical business functions or their potential impact. Option D. Prioritizing the transfer or avoidance of all identified risks to external parties, or by eliminating the associated activities, without a detailed assessment of the cost-benefit or impact on business operations. The correct answer is A. Conducting a thorough business impact analysis, BIA, to understand critical functions and their dependencies, then using this information to prioritize risk identification, analysis, and the selection of appropriate risk responses, followed by continuous monitoring. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a certified security auditor, CSA, must balance the immediate need for risk mitigation with the long-term strategic implications of business continuity and regulatory compliance. The auditor must not only identify potential threats, but also understand their potential impact on critical business functions, and ensure that the chosen response aligns with established risk management frameworks and relevant regulatory requirements. The pressure to demonstrate immediate value can sometimes lead to overlooking the thoroughness required for a comprehensive business impact analysis, BIA, or the strategic considerations of risk acceptance. The correct approach involves a systematic and integrated process of risk management, beginning with a thorough business impact analysis, BIA, to understand the criticality of business processes and the potential impact of disruptions. This BIA then informs the risk identification, analysis, and assessment phases, ensuring that the identified risks are prioritized based on their potential impact on critical functions. The subsequent risk response selection, avoidance, transfer, mitigation, acceptance, must be a deliberate decision, justified by the BIA and aligned with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations. Finally, continuous monitoring and review are essential to ensure the effectiveness of the chosen responses and to adapt to evolving threats and business needs. This comprehensive approach is mandated by the principles of robust information security governance and is often a requirement under various regulatory frameworks that emphasize proactive risk management and business resilience. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate threat mitigation without a foundational BIA fails to understand the true impact of those threats on critical business operations. This can lead to misallocation of resources, addressing minor risks while neglecting those that could cause significant business disruption, thus violating the principle of effective risk management and potentially contravening regulatory expectations for business continuity. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on risk avoidance or transfer without considering the cost-effectiveness or feasibility for all identified risks overlooks the principle of proportionate response. Regulations often permit risk acceptance when the cost of mitigation outweighs the potential impact, provided it is a documented and informed decision. Blindly avoiding or transferring all risks can be economically unsustainable and may not be the most prudent course of action. An approach that neglects the continuous monitoring and review of implemented risk responses is also flawed. Risk landscapes are dynamic, and without ongoing assessment, the effectiveness of mitigation strategies can degrade over time, leaving the organization vulnerable. This failure to adapt and maintain controls is a direct contravention of best practices in risk management and can lead to non-compliance with ongoing regulatory oversight. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management lifecycle. This begins with understanding the business context and critical functions through a BIA. Subsequently, risks are identified, analyzed for likelihood and impact, and assessed against the organization's risk appetite. Risk responses are then selected based on this assessment, considering cost, feasibility, and regulatory requirements. Finally, a robust monitoring and review process ensures that the risk management program remains effective and adaptive. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, justifiable, and aligned with both business objectives and regulatory mandates. Question 17. The efficiency study reveals that the current EOT security audit process for a critical infrastructure network is time-consuming and often results in minor service interruptions. The audit team is considering adopting a new approach to streamline the process and reduce operational impact. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of a comprehensive and responsible EOT security audit? Option A. Focusing exclusively on network-level security controls and overlooking the specific security configurations and potential vulnerabilities inherent in the EOT devices themselves. Option B. Relying solely on the security documentation provided by the EOT device manufacturers and assuming their stated security measures are sufficient. Option C. Conducting aggressive, broad-spectrum penetration testing across all connected EOT devices to identify the maximum number of potential vulnerabilities, regardless of the potential for service disruption. Option D. Implementing a phased audit strategy that begins with passive reconnaissance and vulnerability scanning, followed by targeted active testing based on a predefined risk assessment, and concluding with a review of security configurations and best practice adherence. The correct answer is D. Implementing a phased audit strategy that begins with passive reconnaissance and vulnerability scanning, followed by targeted active testing based on a predefined risk assessment, and concluding with a review of security configurations and best practice adherence. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in EOT security audits, balancing the need for comprehensive security assessment with the practical limitations of device accessibility and potential impact on operational continuity. Auditors must navigate the inherent complexities of diverse EOT ecosystems, where devices may have limited management interfaces, proprietary protocols, and be deeply embedded in critical infrastructure. The challenge lies in identifying vulnerabilities without disrupting essential services or compromising the integrity of the data being processed. This requires a nuanced understanding of risk, a methodical approach to testing, and adherence to established security frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased methodology that prioritizes risk-based assessment and leverages a combination of passive and active techniques. It begins with a thorough understanding of the EOT architecture, including device inventory, network topology, and data flows. This is followed by vulnerability identification through methods like network scanning, firmware analysis, and protocol inspection, always considering the potential impact on device functionality and service availability. Finally, the approach emphasizes the implementation of security best practices, such as secure configuration, access control, and regular patching, tailored to the specific EOT environment. This aligns with the principles of a robust security audit, aiming to identify and mitigate risks effectively while maintaining operational integrity, as generally expected by regulatory frameworks governing information security and risk management. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that focuses solely on active penetration testing without prior risk assessment or understanding of the EOT architecture, is problematic. This can lead to unintended service disruptions, data corruption, or even physical damage to devices, violating the principle of minimizing harm during an audit. It also fails to provide a holistic view of the security posture, potentially overlooking critical vulnerabilities that are not easily exploitable through direct attack. Another incorrect approach is to rely exclusively on vendor-provided security documentation without independent verification. While vendor information is a starting point, it may not reflect the actual deployed configuration or account for emergent vulnerabilities. This passive approach risks missing critical security gaps that could be exploited by attackers. Finally, an approach that neglects the unique security considerations of EOT devices, such as their often limited processing power, lack of robust update mechanisms, and potential for physical tampering, is insufficient. EOT security requires specialized knowledge and techniques beyond traditional IT security, and failing to address these specific challenges leaves the audit incomplete and the organization exposed. Professional reasoning. Professionals conducting EOT security audits should adopt a structured, risk-based methodology. This involves 1. Understanding the scope. Clearly define the EOT environment, its components, and their criticality. 2. Information gathering. Collect comprehensive data on devices, network configurations, and data flows. 3. Vulnerability assessment. Employ a mix of passive and active techniques, prioritizing non-disruptive methods where possible, and escalating to more intrusive testing only after careful risk evaluation. 4. Threat modeling. Identify potential threats and attack vectors relevant to the specific EOT deployment. 5. Best practice implementation. Recommend and verify the implementation of relevant EOT security best practices. 6. Reporting. Document findings clearly, prioritizing risks and providing actionable recommendations. This systematic process ensures that the audit is thorough, effective, and minimizes potential negative impacts on the audited environment. Question 18. Analysis of a certified security auditor's CSA approach to evaluating network security within an organization's hybrid cloud environment, specifically focusing on IaaS and PaaS deployments, reveals several potential strategies. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices and regulatory expectations for a comprehensive network security audit in this context? Option A. Thoroughly reviewing the organization's documented network segmentation strategy, firewall rule sets, and IPS configurations as applied within the IaaS and PaaS environments, verifying their adherence to the principle of least privilege and current threat intelligence. Option B. Reviewing generic cloud security best practice guides without validating their specific implementation and configuration within the organization's unique cloud environment. Option C. Relying exclusively on the cloud provider's compliance certifications, e.g., SOC 2, ISO 27001, as sufficient evidence of the organization's network security posture in the cloud. Option D. Examining only the perimeter firewall of the organization's on-premises network, assuming that cloud-based network security is adequately managed by the provider. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly reviewing the organization's documented network segmentation strategy, firewall rule sets, and IPS configurations as applied within the IaaS and PaaS environments, verifying their adherence to the principle of least privilege and current threat intelligence. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for certified security auditors, CSA, in evaluating the effectiveness of network security controls within a cloud environment. The professional challenge lies in assessing the adequacy of security measures when the underlying infrastructure is managed by a third-party cloud provider, requiring a nuanced understanding of shared responsibility models and the specific security configurations implemented by the organization. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between inherent cloud provider security features and the organization's specific security implementations. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the organization's documented network segmentation strategy, firewall rule sets, and IPS configurations as they are applied within the IaaS and PaaS environments. This includes verifying that logical segmentation effectively isolates sensitive data in critical systems, that firewall rules are granular and adhere to the principle of least privilege, and that IPS signatures are up-to-date and configured to detect and block relevant threats. This approach is best professional practice because it directly addresses the organization's responsibility for securing its workloads and data in the cloud, as mandated by various regulatory frameworks that require organizations to implement appropriate technical controls to protect information assets. For example, under the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is a widely adopted standard in the U.S., organizations are expected to implement security solutions and controls to achieve specific security objectives. Auditing these specific configurations ensures compliance with such requirements and demonstrates due diligence in protecting the organization's digital assets. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cloud provider's compliance certifications, e.g., SOC 2, ISO 27001, fails to acknowledge the shared responsibility model. While these certifications indicate the provider's commitment to security, they do not absolve the organization of its own security obligations for its deployed applications and data. This approach would be a regulatory failure, as it bypasses the auditor's duty to assess the organization's specific security posture. Another incorrect approach that relies only on reviewing generic cloud security best practice guides without verifying their implementation within the specific organizational environment is also inadequate. Generic guides provide a baseline, but the effectiveness of security controls is determined by their specific configuration and application to the organization's unique threat landscape and risk profile. This would represent an ethical failure by not providing a truly comprehensive and tailored assessment. A third incorrect approach that only examines the perimeter firewall of the organization's on-premises network, ignoring the cloud infrastructure, is fundamentally flawed. This fails to recognize the modern reality of hybrid and cloud-native environments, where significant network traffic and data reside outside the traditional on-premises perimeter. This would be a critical audit failure, leading to a misrepresentation of the organization's overall security posture. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the scope of the audit and the specific cloud services being utilized, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS. 2. Identifying the shared responsibility model for the cloud services in use. 3. Reviewing the organization's documented security policy, procedures, and architecture diagrams related to cloud network security. 4. Verifying the implementation and configuration of specific security controls within the cloud environment, including network segmentation, firewall rules, IPS, and VPNs. 5. Correlating findings with relevant regulatory requirements and industry best practices. 6. Documenting all findings, including evidence of compliance and areas for improvement. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current incident response plan, while functional, is perceived as slow to execute and lacks clear escalation paths during critical security events. As a certified security auditor, CSA, operating under U.S. regulatory frameworks, which of the following approaches best optimizes the security governance and management of incident response? Option A. Immediately implement a new, advanced security information and event management system to automate detection and response, deferring any review of the existing incident response plan until the new technology is fully operational. Option B. Conduct a thorough review and enhancement of the existing incident response plan, focusing on process optimization, clear role definitions, streamlined communication channels, and integration with business continuity procedures, followed by rigorous testing and training. Option C. Engage an external cybersecurity firm to completely overhaul the incident response plan from scratch, without significant input from internal IT and security teams, to ensure an unbiased and cutting-edge approach. Option D. Focus on developing a comprehensive set of new security policies and standards related to data handling and breach notification, assuming these will implicitly improve incident response execution. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review and enhancement of the existing incident response plan, focusing on process optimization, clear role definitions, streamlined communication channels, and integration with business continuity procedures, followed by rigorous testing and training. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term strategic goals of security governance, all while adhering to specific regulatory mandates. The auditor must critically evaluate different approaches to incident response planning, considering their effectiveness, efficiency, and compliance. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that not only addresses the immediate incident, but also strengthens the overall security posture and meets legal and regulatory obligations. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review and enhancement of the existing incident response plan, focusing on process optimization. This means analyzing the current plan for inefficiencies, bottlenecks, and gaps in coverage, and then implementing improvements based on best practices and regulatory requirements. For a certified security auditor, CSA, operating within a U.S. jurisdiction, this would involve aligning the plan with frameworks like NIST SB 800-61, which provides guidance on incident handling. Optimization ensures that the plan is not just a document but a living, effective mechanism for detecting, responding to, and recovering from security incidents, thereby minimizing damage and ensuring compliance with regulations like HIPAA, if applicable to the organization's data, or CGIS, if dealing with criminal justice information. This approach demonstrates a commitment to continuous improvement and proactive risk management, which are core tenets of effective security governance. An approach that focuses solely on immediate containment without a structured review of the incident response plan is professionally unacceptable. While containment is critical, neglecting to analyze and improve the plan post-incident leads to repeated inefficiencies and potential failures in future events. This can result in regulatory noncompliance if the organization cannot demonstrate a robust and evolving incident response capability, as required by various U.S. laws and standards. An approach that prioritizes the development of new, complex technologies without first optimizing the existing incident response processes is also professionally flawed. While technological solutions can be valuable, they are often ineffective if the underlying processes are broken. This can lead to wasted resources and a false sense of security, failing to address the root causes of incident response deficiencies and potentially violating regulatory expectations for well-defined and tested procedures. Finally, an approach that relies solely on external consultants to rewrite the incident response plan without internal stakeholder involvement is professionally unsound. While consultants can offer expertise, a plan developed without deep understanding of the organization's specific environment, culture, and existing capabilities is unlikely to be effectively implemented or maintained. This can lead to a plan that is technically sound but practically unworkable, risking noncompliance and operational failure. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory landscape, e.g., NIST, HIPAA, CGIS for U.S.-based organizations. This is followed by a thorough assessment of the current state, including stakeholder feedback and incident analysis. The next step involves identifying areas for improvement, prioritizing those that offer the greatest impact on security posture and regulatory compliance. Finally, the chosen approach should be implemented, tested, and continuously monitored for effectiveness, ensuring alignment with both business objectives and legal obligations. Question 20. The audit findings indicate a significant deficiency in the organization's incident response capabilities, specifically a lack of documented procedures for handling data breaches and insufficient training for personnel responsible for incident handling. Considering the potential financial and reputational damage, which of the following approaches best addresses these findings from a stakeholder perspective? Aligning with audit principles and risk management frameworks like NIST SB 800-30 and ISO 27005. Option A. Immediately mandate the development and implementation of comprehensive incident response plans, including regular tabletop exercises and formal training programs, prioritizing this remediation effort based on its high potential impact on business continuity and regulatory compliance. Option B. Propose the implementation of a new, expensive security technology solution that promises to automate incident detection, without first assessing the organization's current procedural gaps or the cost-effectiveness of the solution. Option C. Advise the organization to focus solely on meeting the minimum compliance requirements for data breach notification, as outlined in relevant regulations, and defer broader incident response improvements to a later date. Option D. Recommend that the organization review its incident response procedures during the next scheduled operational audit, assuming current controls are adequate until further assessment. The correct answer is A. Immediately mandate the development and implementation of comprehensive incident response plans, including regular tabletop exercises and formal training programs, prioritizing this remediation effort based on its high potential impact on business continuity and regulatory compliance. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a significant gap in the organization's ability to detect and respond to emerging cyber threats, impacting its overall security posture. This scenario is professionally challenging because the Certified Security Auditor, CSA, must balance the need for immediate remediation with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the organization's strategic objectives. The auditor's role extends beyond mere identification of issues. It requires providing actionable recommendations that are both effective and feasible, considering the stakeholder perspectives. The correct approach involves prioritizing audit findings based on their potential impact on business operations and regulatory compliance, and then developing a remediation plan that aligns with the organization's risk appetite and available resources. This aligns with the core principles of audit quality assurance and follow-up, ensuring that identified risks are addressed systematically. Specifically, the CSA must consider the guidance provided by frameworks like NIST SB 800-30, Risk Management, and ISO 27005, Information Security Risk Management, when assessing the severity of identified risks and recommending appropriate controls. Ethical conduct dictates that the auditor provides objective and unbiased recommendations, focusing on the best interests of the organization and its stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to recommend the immediate implementation of all identified controls without considering their cost-effectiveness or operational impact. This fails to acknowledge the practical realities of resource constraints and could lead to inefficient allocation of security investments, potentially diverting resources from more critical areas. It also disregards the principle of risk-based auditing, which emphasizes addressing the most significant risks first. Another incorrect approach would be to defer all remediation efforts to a future audit cycle, without establishing interim controls or a clear timeline for addressing the identified gaps. This demonstrates a failure in audit follow-up and remediation, leaving the organization vulnerable to the identified threats. It also breaches the ethical obligation to report findings accurately and promptly, and to ensure that the audit process leads to tangible improvements in security. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on compliance with specific regulations, without considering the broader operational risks or the effectiveness of the controls in mitigating actual threats. While compliance is a critical aspect of security auditing, an effective audit also assesses the operational resilience and the ability of controls to adapt to evolving threat landscapes. This narrow focus can lead to a false sense of security, where an organization meets regulatory checklists but remains exposed to significant risks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a structured approach. 1. Understand the organizational context. Identify key stakeholders, business objectives, and the existing risk management framework. 2. Prioritize findings. Categorize audit findings by risk level, considering likelihood, impact, and regulatory implications. 3. Develop actionable recommendations. Propose specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART remediation steps. 4. Engage stakeholders. Discuss findings and recommendations with relevant parties to ensure buy-in and feasibility. 5. Document and report. Clearly articulate findings, risks, and recommended actions in a comprehensive audit report. 6. Follow up. Monitor the implementation of remediation plans and verify the effectiveness of implemented controls.